Hi everybody, and welcome to the screencast on the lymphatic system as a smaller part of our body's defenses. And you can see on this simplified schematic of our lymphatic system, it kind of looks like our circulatory system in that there's little vessels all over our body. And it helps in just one aspect for our body's defenses and to keep everything healthy and keep the foreign or the bad guys out. So let's look in a little more detail at what that lymphatic system entails. So you can see here, we're going to be dealing with lots of words that start with L, Y, M, P, and H. So here's an even simpler schematic of the lymphatic system. So let's kind of start first at taking a look at the stuff in red and the stuff in blue. So the lymphatic system kind of works with your circulatory system in that it's carrying fluids around. And so in the circulatory system, the main organ that pumps those fluids is the heart. And it's pumping blood through arteries all over your body. And those arteries eventually make it to all the different body cells that you have. They drop off oxygen, nutrients, but they also pick up waste and CO2. And they carry that blood that's full of the waste back to your heart in veins. And goes back to your heart. The heart pumps it to the lungs to get cleaned out, and then it comes back to the heart, and it's all clean and fresh and full of oxygen, and it starts to cycle back through the arteries into the cells. Now, where your lymphatic system comes into play is is with these body cells over here. And so they're essentially, every time that your blood kind of travels through here, a little bit of the liquid leaches out. It doesn't quite get back into the vein. So your body cells are being bathed in this liquid, and that's okay. That's not a bad thing. But if you imagine that every time this happens, there's more and more fluid that slowly leaks out. And that's a problem when we have too much fluid that leaks out. And that fluid, we call it lymph. And so what your lymphatic system does is it takes that extra fluid that leaches out and it kind of sucks it up and puts the lymph, check this off here, into the lymphatic vessel. And the lymphatic vessel is trying to get that extra fluid back into regular circulation. But they figure since they have it, why not clean it out? So they go through that liquid lymph, goes through some lymph nodes along the way and kind of gets filtered and cleaned out. So we have our lymph node, check. Now, right at the juncture of our lymphatic vessel and the veins, where all that lymph would be going back into circulation, there's a duct. It's not shown on this drawing, but that would be the final exchange where the lymph goes through the duct and then back into primary circulation where it's nice and clean, back into the fluid that it was once a part of. So that's the overview of the lymphatic system. Now let's look at some of these individual players. First, we have lymph. Now, lymph you've probably actually heard of before as some different terms. So, if lymph is still in the arteries, we just call it plasma. And that's something that you can donate I believe, every 2 weeks or even every week. So, if it's the liquid and when it's inside arteries and veins, we call it plasma, or the liquid part of our blood. Now, as I said, some of that fluid tends to leach out, and when it leaches out, we call it interstitial or ISF fluid. And that's when it's just hanging out. It really doesn't have anywhere to go. It's just kind of surrounding all of our body cells, hoping to kind of somehow get back into the plasma. And that's what we call on our lymphatic system. And so when that fluid gets picked up as in the lymphatic vessels, we call it then as lymph. So it's really the same thing with three different names, depending on where in the body happens to be located. So once it gets picked up as lymph in the lymphatic system, as I mentioned earlier, it'll go along these vessels in this picture on the right. And our lymph is traveling through there. Then it hits a lymph node. And so you can see in this picture, blown up one here, lymph is kind of entering from lots of different avenues all over here, entering, etc. And then it gets filtered of all the debris and foreign things that maybe have accumulated, and then it exits and keeps going. Keeps going, going, going until it gets to the lymphatic duct. Remember, that's the last stopping place for lymph before it drains into our veins and back to our heart. And don't ask me why, it seems pretty uneven here, but there's two ducts in our body. One duct drains this portion, the lighter green, and the other one has the rest of your body. And so the lymphatic ducts are those last lymph collectors before it gets pushed into the veins. Now, unfortunately, if those ducts ever get blocked or a lymph node gets blocked and lymph cannot make it back into the vein and circulatory system, we have a condition called lymphedema. It's actually pretty difficult to treat. So lymphedema is really just the blockage of a lymphatic vessel or duct so that lymph can't keep going up, up, up into the heart, back into the veins, into the arteries. And obviously the one on the right is a very extreme case, the one on the left isn't as extreme, but you can see what happens if that plasma starts leaking out just a little bit, and if it can't get back into the lymphatic vessels, we have a buildup, and that's called and referred to as lymphedema. If you maybe even heard of the word edema, we kind of has that same ending here. Edema just means swelling, and in this case we're dealing with lymph fluid, which is causing the swelling in this case. Now we've talked a lot about these LYMPH words, but there's some other organs in the lymphatic system that play a role. And I guess I haven't lied completely. We still have a new LYMPH word, and those are the lymphocytes. Pointer here. And those lymphocytes, you can see, here's our favorite prefix, but the root word is cyte, and cyte means cell. This is just a type of white blood cell that's made, stored, gets developed, and matured in the lymphatic system. And so there's two types of lymphocytes, and I'm not going to get into the details of what they do in this screencast, but you will see them if you look at the immune and specific defenses screencast. So our thymus is part of the lymphatic system, and the thymus has a role, and that role is to, as you can see here, you can probably take a guess which cells that the thymus matures and develops, and those are the T cells. That's why they're called T cells. And then the red bone marrow has a job of maturing B cells. Now our thymus is located right above the heart, between the lungs. It starts out when you're really young, it's very large as we're building up our immune system. But as we get older, that thymus gets much, much, much smaller. And our red bone marrow, well, that's inside our bones. Over here, our tonsils are one of many areas of storage of these different types of lymphocytes. And so you can see what's great about the tonsils and what's really smart in design is that they're located at one of the main entrances of foreign microbes. And so they're stocked full of all these white blood cells just waiting for some action. It's a great way to try and have a barrier where a lot of things are entering right off the bat so they don't get any farther than that. So it's a great way to defend right off the bat. And there's one final organ in the lymphatic system that we'll discuss in this video, and that's the spleen. So I like to think of the spleen as the lymph node, but just for red blood cells in your blood. And so it filters, it kind of cleans out the red blood cells, it recycles different parts of those, and it offers, it's kind of just junkyard. It takes those old red blood cells, maybe takes some of the good stuff out of there, it puts them into new red blood cells, just kind of keeps them healthy and offers any maintenance. And the spleen, though, is located right in the heart of all your abdominal organs down here, right underneath your stomach. And so if you ever have heard of somebody lacerating their spleen, that's actually a pretty serious injury because there's so much blood going in and out that you could have very, very severe internal bleeding just because of that simple fact. And so that's a look at the lymphatic system, which is a smaller part of our body's entire defense mechanisms. I hope you found that helpful.